We spent a little bit of time earlier going over a little bit about verbal uh, connections and how people connect verbally. One of the first ways we connect as human beings is through sound and through verbal communication. We all know that it seems like the first word that a young child learns is no, or its equivalent, whatever language it's learning, because that's a word they hear most frequently. Those who learn and connect best verbally learn and connect through the words that are used. A verbal learner is someone who will be able to recall practically everything you say word for word. As you walk through a home, as you have a discussion about a home, as you ask them about what they see, they're going to talk quite a bit about details that they heard. This is the individual who can recall a conversation or something you may have said a long time ago that you may not even recall having said. It's their primary way of processing information, and so it is the way that they use most frequently when they choose to communicate. Verbal communication does include written communication. A verbal connector is someone who is very aware of their vocabulary, is very aware of the words that they are using and how they're being perceived. When connecting with a verbal connector, it's best to find out early on what their preferred form of verbal connection is. For many who are more outgoing and interpersonal, which we'll look at a little bit later, verbal interpersonal are great on a phone call. They're great in a one-on-one conversation. Zoom works really well for them. In fact, Zoom works better than a phone because a phone removes a certain aspect of the verbal communication without being able to see the other person. For those who are verbal and intrapersonal, another point we'll look at a little bit later, but those who aren't as comfortable speaking one-on-one, but they're the ones who might write long, detailed emails or whose text messages are very long and detailed, are going to choose to prefer to communicate by written words, email, text messages. A verbal communicator is someone who's going to look at the contract and ask you, what does all this mean? And have a conversation about it. A written verbal communicator is someone who's going to actually read the contract and ask specific questions about the contract. So you'll have to be prepared to communicate with both in their best way. Now, this can be difficult if your primary form of communication is not verbal, if you prefer to show and to do hands-on. So be aware that those who are verbal, you'll notice early on in the conversation when you say, "Have you got a moment?" or "Let's talk about this," they'll keep going. These are the types of individuals who, as you're having conversations, as you're asking questions to gain more information about them, be guided in the types of questions you ask. Open-ended questions are important to gain information. They can go a long way with them. So be prepared to set some limits on how long the conversation goes so that you can stay focused. And then, as always, with most of my verbal communicators, will say, "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow up. I'll send you an email. I'm pretty sure you'll think of something that that we missed and respond in the email." But be prepared to talk and to write with someone who makes verbal communications as their primary way of connecting. When you do that, they'll feel validated, they'll gain the information, they'll retain it better, and you will gain a lot more information from them by using written and verbal communications.